Hi, my name is David and I've been fixing guitars for about 40 odd years, and this is the second video on this particular guitar, Yamaha FG from 1970s. If you haven't seen it already, the first video covered what I did initially in terms of a setup and inspection of this guitar, and then the final decision that it actually did need a neck reset. This video covers the neck reset and also the refinishing in Nitro that I've done on this guitar. Okay, hope you enjoy it. Now, what we're going to achieve here, the first part of doing this neck reset, is that we've got to take off release this part of the fretboard from the sound hole, from the top here. And first thing we've got to do in order to be able to do that and free it off is to be able to remove this fret here, which is level pretty much, it's the 13th fret, and it's pretty much level with the middle of the heel being underneath being this side of the body. I think you can obviously calculate that because you can see the edges of the body. I've heated this up with a soldering iron, and I've just lightly, this one was quite stubborn. All this does is to release any glue that's underneath it. I don't know whether it's had glue put in it or not. Usually you can smell a bit of bubbling or hear a bit of bubbling that comes up. Normally I'd have a piece of metal on there protecting it, but protecting the sides of that. Anyway, I've heated it, and I've also just gently got the edge of this very sharp chisel just to lift that corner like that, which is what I've done. And now I use these, which have got a fairly flat bottom. Well, they've got a flat bottom because otherwise you can't, they are fretting pliers, so you can't get in there. And as you can see, I can get the whole piece underneath. Well, always got a deaf one. And now, because I'm going to be using this one again, I'm going to just lever it out very gently. I may need to use a bit more heat to get it out. Oh, feel it releasing. What you're trying to avoid, obviously on this, is trying to avoid putting it very, very gingerly. I'm going to get a bit more heat on that. You're trying to avoid any pulling up of the fretboard itself, of the wood, of the rosewood of the fretboard. And by heating it up, that just helps to release it. Some people I've seen even use solder on top of that, which I think transfers a little bit more heat. They put a bubble of solder on top, but I haven't done that myself. I just usually do this, and eventually up at this end, it will come. So I'll give it another go. Yeah, getting out there. Tight grip on there so it doesn't slip out. And there it comes. Okay, put that one to one side. And what I'm going to be doing here is just take that off for the time being, just to check that it's okay. There's no damage to the board either side of it. Yep, there's a tiniest bit there, but that's all right. Won't be too much of a problem. I'll just move my soldering iron away. It's beginning to melt my worktop, which is not very helpful. There's a little bit there, but that will just sand down before I actually put the fret back in. Now, that will leave me there with this very, very narrow slot, obviously. My next job that I'm going to be doing is using a Japanese pull saw, which has a very, very narrow blade. I think you can see the slot in there. And if I can find it, I can't see it, I will be then sawing down through there, but being very careful just to saw this, and therefore I'm separating that from there. So why do we do this? Well, there are two methods, in fact, of getting to the dovetail joint, which is underneath here. One of which is that some people take that fret out and they drill two tiny little holes, and then they insert either heat rods or the tip of a steam machine into those holes, and that usually is one of the ways in which they can get into there's a cavity in behind the dovetail joint, and they get into there to the aim of getting some heat in there is obviously to soften up the glue and that means that the neck can then pop out. My method is regarded by some people as being a little more barbaric, but I think it's probably the one that has the genuine results and really doesn't do much damage. I mean, the danger is that you're going to dig down into as you saw through this gap here, down there, you're going to dig too far down into the heel itself. But to be honest, the guitar's going to be refinished. Nobody will be ever the wiser, and no one will even spot it. The secret of this is my Japanese saw, but to be honest, any saw that has got a the teeth on this side are narrower than that one. Strange enough, they're about, make sure I'm on the right side. No, it's that one. It's the smaller side, which is about 0.6 of a millimeter thickness, and it will run in that groove. And I will now saw that just very, very lightly with this pullback saw, and I don't go any further. And I've actually put masking tape along the join between the fretboard and the neck itself so that I don't do any damage. Okay, here goes. I can do this on camera. It's a tricky little operation just to get it started, but you can see I've protected. That's it, I'm in. And this cut I'm making is pretty much exactly the size of the slot, which means it's not opening up the slot anymore. Right, I'm just having a look and see how far down I'm going. As I said, it really is a very light cut. I just need to get it through the fingerboard, and I've got masking tape on this side as a guide, and then I shall have a look at the other side without getting as I did before, getting my head in the way of the camera. The joys of filming these things. I know how to do this job, I just don't know how to film them. That's going down nicely. And I'm just going to go around the other side. Well, pretty much there. It's kind of one for luck job, this is. Obviously I can't go too deep down here because there's a truss rod underneath it. So that will probably stop me going any further. That looks to be about right. This is the one for luck bit. I can feel the truss rod, so I know I'm spot on there. Yeah. What I don't want to do is when I put heat on here and soften the glue underneath this and get palette knives and things underneath there, what I don't want to do is to break it there. I need it to come away cleanly from that point. Then I can get back into the dovetail joint. And that's now going to be the next stage of heating this up. Now, I will probably use a heat blanket. I won't show you, I'll do this in the next bit, to get the heat through there and get it really, really warm. But to be honest, a normal iron, it's always better to use an old iron. I've got into loads of trouble in the past for doing all sorts of things with the family iron. Almost banned from the house. But yeah, the answer then is to get some heat on there, soften the glue up underneath this, get a palette knife in there, and then hopefully that's going to come off easily. And then I've got full access into the cavity behind the dovetail joint in underneath there, and then get some steam in there, and Bob's your uncle. Now this is the job which I always consider is the most barbaric job you can do on the guitar. To be honest, it's more barbaric than when we actually take the dovetail, split the dovetail joint. Basically, I'm just trying to bring this over here. It's got stuck on something. I'm using what I used to do heat in my workshop, which is a Chinese-made roll of heat mat, which can heat up to gather about 150 to 200 degrees. I can just about hold it with this, with my gloves on. I love my unmatching gloves. But you could just use a steam iron on fairly hot. And what I'm trying to do, obviously, you can see a knife I've got in part way, and I'm gradually heating up via the, it's very hot, I'm gradually heating up the area underneath through the frets, and then when I do it, I have done this in the past when I've actually seen the glue bubbling out of the side. I've just got an ordinary very sharp kitchen knife there. Some people use a palette. You sometimes just have to use a chisel. I've got one over there. There's a chisel just to get into the corner down here, and we hope that by softening everything through the frets with this very, very hot heat source, as I say, you can use an iron, but I think we had that discussion. Don't take the household iron without any permission, otherwise your life won't be living. Your worth won't be worth living, I should say. Right, that's going to be very, I can tell that's already very hot. I can smell it. The thing you can't do on this. Put that to one side. And let's see if, using minimal force, no, I'm not seeing any movement there. It must have stuck back down again while I was setting the camera up. Let's try and get that in there. So I've released it on the other side quite well, but it's not releasing very well on this side. I'm sure you get the picture. And if I decide I'm going to do this without having a camera, having to think about the camera, then I will do. But you can see the gist, and I gradually lift it. If I use that sharper edge of that, that'll get in better. I can feel it cutting, I can feel it sort of slicing into the glued area. What you're trying to avoid really is too many cracks and backs and pops, because that implies it's going to be taking bits of the soundboard with it. No, yep. Not budging yet. It's one of those typical jobs that all of a sudden you release that last bit of glue that's been hanging on to it. I'll give it another go, and then I might spend, rather than saving it on the video. That is mighty hot. I don't know why I've got the thermostat at. I can't read it from there, 100 and something or other. This has been, this uncoils and is a long one, and I use this for bending sides of guitars to get some heat in there and sandwich this in between my formers when I'm bending some sides. It's very efficient. It's about metre and a half long when it's unraveled, and I just simply put a loop around it, a wire loop around it, to use it as a heat source because it's so efficient normally. I would think, if anything, the glue is, I'm certainly not seeing anything bubble out the side, but I'm sure you get the picture. So I think what I'll do is shut the video off and give it another go, and then next time you see it, hopefully you've got the gist of what I'm trying to do, and you saw the knife going in underneath, but it might take 10 minutes or so to it. But let's have another go while I've still got the camera on. What I'm trying not to do, the technique here is not to lift, but literally just clear the area. It's just about coming through the other side now. And basically the only... that's interesting. Did you hear that go? That's it, just breaking away at the side of the fretboard. It's breaking away now from where I've sawn it, so we're nearly there. So I might just leave the camera on for a little bit longer and see if I can just do the same thing on this side. But honestly, I'm using quite a lot of force behind it, and I'm going to get my arm away from the knife. Health and safety has no bounds in a luthier's workshop. There's far too many ways of giving yourself potential. There you go. I've certainly got that end loosened up, but it's... Can you hear the glue? I don't know whether you can hear it on there. I can hear it just cutting through there. Well, it'd be good to film this moment, so perhaps I'm going to leave it on because it is going to go, I can tell you. And I have a strong sensation it's all going to come out in one piece, which is very nice news. Right, we know we're up on this side now. Fair enough, I thought this was going to be the difficult side, but it's not. It's the one that's... I can feel where it's stuck now. Usual safety precaution, you're a bit more freed up. Look at that. Now I'll turn that knife around and see if I can... No, I know I'm clear that way. Oh, look at that. Just try not to take too much of the masking tape with it. So you'll be seeing in my videos, you see a lot of pink masking tape. Just lift that over there. You're going to see me when we do the video for that. No, I know that will break. I don't want to push it too much that way. Okay, but I'm sure you get the drift. One more go, and then I'm going to switch the video off for the time being, and the next time you will see this is be off. But I don't want... Okay, right, I'm going to switch off. I would say next time I'll be showing you what the neck pocket, the pocket above the, what it looks like. So there we have it. About 5 minutes on from where the last clip finished, and it's all come out pretty cleanly. Let's have a look at the bottom of the... you can see there's a little bit of the mahogany is pulled away. It's obviously glued very, very well to that point. And when I've got the neck out, then I will actually glue that in there, take it off there with a chisel and glue that back on there. It's just to make sure that all the surfaces end up by being level when I glue it all back together again. But you can see down here, this is an example I could have... Now, here's a technical point. Most people would say, cut at that fret, the one where it joins the body. But in fact, I don't do that for the reason being that you're too inclined when you're sawing to cut into this area here, which is very difficult to repair. Whereas if you get any irregularities, and you can see there, I've got this little bit of, what do you call it, cut back on this. But you can see here that I'm much less in danger of cutting through anything that's decorative, which means that it would be difficult to replace. So all in all, good job. A little bit of pullback there, but that really doesn't matter because it's going to have a little because we're raising this part of the fretboard, then it will have a little sliver of a millimetre or two underneath the last bit of the fretboard when we increase this angle. But as you can see, this is where, let's look at this joint, very tight joint on the sides down there. I gather, and I believe this is true from my own experiences, they're not glued to the sides there and there. The gluing surface is that, but it looks like a very tight joint. So it'll be quite interesting to see how that does come out and how much steam you can get in there to really get that glue, which we're hoping is high glue rather than epoxy. Getting the steam right in there to really soak that glue out. And I'll be able to tell quite quickly whether it's epoxy or high glue, because it'll ooze and be very smelly. So the next stage is going to be building, and I'll show you, do it in stages. I will show you how to build a very fundamental jig that sits across the top of here and supports the whole of the body of the guitar, but also has the ability, I'll turn this over, it also has the ability to be able to push up here on the heel as I'm steaming it. I can put pressure so that there'll be an iron piece or steel piece along here that will help to push that upwards away from the guitar as I'm steaming it, and also using a lot of welly side to side and things like this to try and break the glue bond on this one. It's a tight one, but it's a project for another day, so you might see a different t-shirt tomorrow. So let me introduce you to some of the tools that we need for trying to release this joint without breaking it. First thing is my little steamer. It's a steam cleaner. I bought this one locally for someone that hadn't used it very much, and I think it was a £5. That for those people that aren't in England, that's about £5 or $6 or whatever it is. And basically what it does is it's got a sharp nozzle on it, and I think it's primed up. It's difficult to do on there, and I simply just force steam into the joint. And I've been doing this for about half an hour. Okay, which gradually, the idea being, and I'm not seeing much of that happening, but the idea being is that the heat going in there is breaking up the glue. Now bear in mind, I think you can see this on here, the glue line is only this one here on the outside of the joint there and there. So my other method of doing things, of trying to get down there to release the glue before I try and put any force on there, I haven't done any force on this at all, is to take a Stanley knife blade or one of these flat little scalpel blades. Bear in mind that I'm used to handling sharp objects like on a daily basis, so health and safety out the window. And basically what I do is gradually work this down, and using a bit of steam and using a bit of heat on that blade to break things up. I'm looking for my little hammer, and just basically just gently, I've got a roll of tape underneath here so I'm not damaging the bottom. And as you can see, I can do this, and I'm down to almost that mark on there. I just cut this Stanley blade with a angle grinder. That's what I do to make it fit the gap. And I'm just gradually working my way down. Now, at the moment, I am a bit further than that mark that I put on there. But my aim, what I've got to do is eventually I've got to get to that, because that's the bottom of the joint, which I've just marked with that bit of tape on there. So if I could get the whole of that blade down there, I would have effectively broken the joint completely, got rid of all the glue in it. So as I say, combination, getting these little blades in here. I've never seen anyone use this method. I must admit, everyone just uses basically steam and brute force, but I think there's a slightly gentler way of doing it. Although it doesn't sound gentle, hammering a half a Stanley knife blade into the gap. And I don't think I've got it down quite as much on this side. It's not quite as released. Now, if I wiggle that now, I have actually made some movement. Yeah, there is a you can definitely see that it's broken away at the top there, that there's nothing holding that joint open there. So I'm going to persevere. I've got time on my side basically today, so I'm not fussed about doing anything else, and I'm more than happy just to proceed and get these little blades as deep as I can using a hammer, and if they get stuck too far down, I just heave them out, wiggle them around with the famous mole grips and or a pair of pliers, and it's all very, very basic, low-tech stuff. I can feel that going in. It's really well, little bits of glue coming out of there, and then hopefully somewhere on the line I should be at the stage where I've loosened it enough that only a small amount of force would be necessary. I can actually feel that. Actually, I can feel that digging the glue out. So how far down am I? Down to there. Where's my screwdriver? There's the screwdriver. I reckon I've cleared half of that. I reckon I've cleared half of the glue down the side of that joint. Now, one of the dangers with these particularly, should I turn that over, is that there's a possibility, oh, by the way, I've also put the scalpel blade down the side of there. As I said, we're not fussed about the finish on here because I'm going to be redoing it and that'll be another video. But what I'm actually doing here is that I've released any finish from the outside so that I can also get the steam in there and heat this part up and soak it a bit, and perhaps some of that's got into the core, got in round to the main part of the joint. Now, also turning this over again because the finish is going to be done, I've also made sure that it's not binding on here. But the worry is with these type of necks is that there is a possibility that they're not made in one piece. I don't know, and I can't see any sign of a joint. Looking from there, possibly I'd have to dig in a little bit deeper to see whether it was. And I have experienced in the past where a neck has broken there quite cleanly, and you find there's a dowel joint going down through there, and it leaves half of it in there, which is mighty more difficult to deal with. You haven't got much option other than to glue the whole lot back together again with a tiny little sliver of wood in there, just to, which you can do effectively do a neck reset, but I can assure you we're gonna get this whole lot out. Okay, so even using brute force and using this jig, I've been unable to shift the bottom of the neck at all in any respect, and I'm going to show you exactly why that's happened. But in the meantime, I thought I'd just show you the jig. If you're going to do one of these at home and you've got a guitar which you can do this with, and there's some movement in the neck after a couple of hours of trying and steaming and whatever it is, then it's worthwhile having this jig because it will lift the neck outwards without damaging it. The idea being is that it's a plywood cradle, very, very simple, one piece of plywood and another little piece of plywood underneath, holding the guitar in like a cradle, and then there's a free floating metal bar underneath that you can bolt up from underneath. You can just turn the bolts up and raise that, and hopefully that bar, because it sits on the bottom of the heel, has got the sort of enough pressure to be able to pop the neck out. And if you've looked at videos with these, you'll see people doing it. In this case, however, it wasn't something I can use, and you'll see why in a second. Okay, I'm going to just take that off and then you can have a look at the guitar. This is one of those situations where if you phoned up the owner, if it was somebody else's guitar, you could say, well, I've got bad news, but then on the other hand, I've got good news. And he'd immediately think, hang on, I'm just moving this out of the way. He would immediately think, oh my goodness me, this is going to cost me, I can tell. But in fact, almost the opposite is going to be true. Okay, that's that out of the way. Now, why did I not pursue getting the neck out? Actually, you can see quite clearly in this picture. Can you see here? There's a crack developing. So even though I've managed to get my blades probably at least halfway down there, and releasing that joint, then what was going to happen, and I think it's probably more obvious on the other side. Turn that one over. Yeah, it is. Can you see now there's a much more defined crack, which is actually in the outside surface of the wood. It's nothing critical. It'll glue back in. It's basically only at the top layer, but it's a sign that this part was beginning to break away from this part. And no matter what pressure I was going to use on it, the bottom end was never going to come away. As you can see, I've created a bit of space in the top there. And you can see that quite clearly down the side. There is the minusculest gap. When I say minuscule, it's gapped at the top there by about 1 millimeter. Anyway, I was looking at this and thinking, oh, I really need to get this neck out. That's the only way to do it. And then I suddenly looked at the overall guitar, and I'm going to step back a bit. I don't know whether you can see this from here, but actually, I was suddenly aware that although in previous, whenever I've looked at this guitar, the neck's always looks slightly wrong because there's no back bend to it. It's always looking as though it was sort of like coming up to meet the guitar. It now has a bit of back bend. And if we put the rule on there, I'm going to kneel down on here so you can see more clearly what I'm doing. If I put the ruler along the frets now, you'll actually see that instead of doing that, which is what it did before, I'm trying to exaggerate that, which was just basically to touch the, just touch the top of the board, touch the top of the bridge. You can see now, there's the difference. And that difference is about 5 to 6 millimeters. It's gone there, which is absolutely what I want. And so somewhere on the line, with all the pushing, shoving, bad, lousy treatment, steaming or whatever it is, and opening up that little gap at the top there, what I've actually done is achieve what we're set out to do by taking the whole neck out and shimming bits off and putting little shims in and doing that. I've actually kind of done it by default without having to do all of that work. So that in its terms is good news. Bear in mind, this guitar is going to be mine. It's going to be refinished. Then it's up to me what I do with it. So what I'm going to be doing is I will double check what the ideal measurement is, that how much that should be above the bridge, that straight line. And then what I'll do is I will clamp the guitar up into that arrangement so that it can't move or do anything. And then what I'm going to do here is I will make some series of very, very thin little slivers, like wedges, more than anything else, that will slot in behind there, slot in the bigger gap behind the dovetail on both sides and at the sides, and then a little bit down where the gap which I pushed open, I'll fill those with a sliver of wood as well. And then I will end up with a joint that is locked tight at the bottom here, because we know it is, because it ain't going to go anywhere. And then what I'll be doing is effectively I will have created a very, very strong neck with those little bits of wood, and then glue them in, and then, as I said, just leave it all to harden for a little while, a couple of days, that sort of thing. And then I have set the neck for good. And nobody ain't ever going to set it ever again, because you won't be able to take it apart. So I thought it might be quite interesting today to have a look and see what effect the work I've done so far on this one, what it's achieved. Now, yesterday we know that when we put the ruler along from the straight edge along here to where it ended up above the bridge, that was giving me 7 millimeters. I'm going to put captions at the bottom of all of these showing the equivalent thou, because I know that nobody on the other side of the Atlantic understands millimeters for love or money. So if we do this today, then I won't do it now because I've already done it. It's settled within 24 hours of a very, very hot evening and night. It's settled back to just around about the 5 mils, so it's lost a millimetre or so in settlement, which is fine. It's what you'd expect to do. I expected possibly to lose a 2 or 3, but it hasn't. So this is as it was before, with no strings on it. It had it's settled back to about 5 mil. Ideally, I reckon we want it down to about 3 millimeters. That's what we'll settle. So I was thinking, well, have I got the room to do that? And how can I actually achieve that? So what I did was, in order to see what sort of scope I'd got in terms of putting wedges and things like this to get it perfectly right, I thought what I'll do is I'll put it under tension. So as you can see, I put the 4 bigger strings in. And then when I do this, we've actually got, not surprisingly, it has actually gone back to pretty much where it was before we started doing all this, where that straight edge, basically, if you can see there, it actually connects. It just will slide over there with a bit of wiggle room. So in other words, the 5 mil or 6 mil or whatever it is we gained by in the slop in there, when you put it under tension, we lose it completely. But that's hardly surprising because I haven't put any wedges or anything like that in here. It's just simply pushing it back to where it was before I did that. And as soon as I slacken the strings off, it'll drop back. So what it does tell me, which I think is really good news, is that I have that kind of 5 millimeters of movement. In other words, this neck here, this joint will move by 5, it'll open up by 5 mil or close back the 5 mil. So that gives me, if I'm looking for something as I am, and I'm going to spin round here, the one on here under tension, and I've also slackened the strings off, it does give me, if we're trying to emulate the action of this one, that one there, if I run the straight edge over it, the one which is perfectly set up, you can't see it because of the strings, but actually I can assure you that's about 3 millimeters above there. Obviously at the moment, going back to this one, if you try and do anything with the string tension at the moment, it has come up. This is the whole point. It's come up, and it's still giving me a very low action here, quite a sloppy action, which as you'd expect because it's basically gone back to where it was before. It's just the fact that it's using the string tension to hold everything together and not the glued surfaces. So that's where we go. I'll come back a bit later on. Today's the day when I'm going to work out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to jig this in order to get the this neck angle to exactly what I want, and how much wedging and gluing and whatever I need to do. I hadn't realized that I'd forgotten to video this stage of stripping the guitar down. I had a day or so while that joint is drying out fully, and I thought, well, I might as well just strip the guitar down. And I realized I promised to do a video on how to do that. So I'll actually try and recap what I've actually done, and so you'll get an opportunity to see how I prepare a guitar for refinishing. This one, as you can see, is 90% done now. Those sides are surprisingly light maple. I'm going to go around to the side where I haven't taken that finish off, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can see the back all but finished. There's still some little evidence of the dark staining on that maple, and I'm going to have to be very careful when I actually reapply the stain to make sure that it gives a very even coverage. I'm just going to have to clean up those dark areas completely. So what process do I use? Well, mainly, let's go to the table. I've laid things out over here. Because this guitar is, I think, of an era where they use polyurethane, then, and it's only a very, very light coat, then, and I always do trial ones before, I've just used ordinary paint stripper. And that does seem to have done the trick. It lifted it enough for me to be able to use my curved and fairly sharp scraper blades. These are very, very cheap. I tend to use curved ones for obvious reasons. You can get into the curves, and I've got ones for going into tighter curves. But then all I do is just simply scrape away at the surface until all the residue of what's left from the paint stripper has come away. You'll see here, if I look closely, what it actually looks like. You can, I think I found some pieces up here. Yeah, you can see some bits and pieces where that's what I was scraping away there. You can see the shiny bit at the top surface. And then next stage or other, once all that's off and it's back to this finish, i.e. most of the stain is still left on there, but then I've got to sort of take it down that little bit just to take the stain off it. Now, very, very careful operation this, and I've had years and years of experience, and I've had years and years and years of having laminated guitars where I've gone through the top layer of laminate around these edges using power tools and things like this. So over the years I've developed a kind of power tool way of doing it, but is relatively soft and gentle, and it's using these. I've got a cordless polisher. Basically it's an angle grinder with a very small 3-inch disc on it. Look at the way I've worn that one down there. But I have it on very slow speed, and I also use at least one, if not two, foam pads in order to cushion the effect of what I'm doing. And I'm using somewhere around the region of, could be between 260 and what's the other grade of 400. That's the sort of area you want to be looking at. Medium grit on the ear, but using a very, 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 I'm almost holding it away from the, when I'm doing it, I'm almost holding it away from the surface rather than letting it dig in. And that's the key, because it's very, very easy with these laminates, which are only less than, I don't know, they're top maple, that's maple on there. That's probably way less than 1 millimeter thick. So therefore you can imagine you've only got to, I'm just looking at the top edge there. I might have, no, it's still maple. I might just have exposed the bottom layer just gently on there, but I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world, because it's going to be dark again anyway, and it's a similar finish underneath. But you can see there, that's the danger areas. That's what you're trying to avoid doing all the time. Particularly too on the front, which I suspect is also well, I know that these are also laminated, and you definitely don't want to, because that's going to be a much lighter finish. And you can see there, I've got it really nicely around the edges. It's not dug in at all. So there's the sanding area. My favorite tool actually is, I'm showing you that one because those are kind of readily available, these cordless ones. Don't use a corded one. They're way too vicious. The cordless ones are considerably softer. Even softer and better is my air polisher, but at the moment I haven't got my air supply sorted out. I have got my air supply in here, but it's not sorted out. But again, you can see that using Velcro discs and plenty of sponge. There's two layers. There's a spongy one there and there's a spongy one there. So again, this one, because it's a lightweight tool, I'm just really as I said before, I'm really trying to keep the pressure off rather than do it. And it's, again, it is one of those things of years of experience. I can also, those ones there are 75mm 3-inch pads, which is generally what I use, but I can go into smaller areas using an even smaller one. That's, I forgot what size those are. Small is the answer, 2-inch, aren't they? Those are the pads. I don't know what size those ones, particular ones. They're 120s, so if I have been using 120s, I've been doing it very, very lightly. A little word on finishes. I mean, this one here, because it's a 1970s guitar, then I am guessing from experience that it's polyurethane varnish effectively on there, and this one's only got a very, very thin layer on it. As soon as you get into the 1980s and 1990s, you do tend to get these very, very thick, very, very solid polyester and epoxy finishes, which are really difficult to get off. And certainly things like this sort of stuff doesn't, this paint and varnish stripper, this, which is basically known label type of product, that just won't touch them, and nor will any of the other ones. And in fact, if they will get through those sort of varnishes, then to be honest, they're going to start damaging the wood. So in those particular instances, not that because those tend to be the cheaper end of guitars, you're less likely to be doing a refinish job on them, then that's the case. You will sometimes find an earlier guitar, pre-1960s, will probably be cellulose, nitro cellulose finish. And again, they can be treated the same way as this. That stripper will take those off. And in fact, that is where I'm going to be going with this one. I like cellulose finishes on a guitar. I think compared to a thick polyester finish, which will tend to have, it's like adding another layer of wood on top of it. It's doubling the thickness, I think, in some cases. And obviously, gone to all this trouble of nice tone woods, and then you go and dull it with a thick layer of stuff. I find the nitrocellulose really, really good, easy to use. I've got my spraying facility set up, which I can use. I've got two different sorts of spray guns, and I will try and remember to show you what that looks like before we do it. But yeah, generally speaking, everything condition-wise is good. The guitar's showing up some really interesting side of things. I'll turn it round on here. Just as an example of how good the quality of Yamaha craftsmanship is. This one, is it there? I can't even see it on here. I'm looking for the center joint. Yeah, you can just about make it out. Those are center lines, which you can barely see. I think you can see it where the grain's matching. Those are center lines that people who make guitars dream of getting center joins like that are completely invisible. How on earth they've done it and what machinery they've used, I have no idea. But it's absolutely brilliant, and it's very, very good. It's just so indicative of the quality of these guitars. I'll just have a look and see where, I'll just show you where. Obviously, this is the contentious area because this is where all the steaming and the hard work went on. But you can see, apart from that chip out there where it cracked, and I can fill that with a bit of sanding, sand down some mahogany, because the neck's mahogany. I can sand down the mahogany into mahogany dust and use a bit of super glue to fill that. And then once that's, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do the neck dark brown, but it will have a color on it. It'll just go a bit more like mahogany. Likewise, I've done that, and I'm going to show you a way of, I can't get hold of the right decals, so I'm going to try and cut a template on my Cricut machine. You can still see that there's a bit of damp from where I cleaned it off up there. It hasn't yet been in the sun. But looking at the other side of the neck joint, you can see we're not going to have any problems with that about when it comes down to refinishing. Obviously, we haven't put the wedges in, haven't set it up or whatever yet. The other thing I was going to show you, which now it's in this state, is another reason why these guitars are so good. And I'm going to tap it. So that's the treble side. Listen to that. Again, luthier's dream of getting soundboards to sound like this, to ring like that. It's absolutely beautiful. I could spend weeks playing about with bracing. But it's just so nice that it's just got a very even tone that just drifts between the bass and the thing. And I'm sure the people, and even down here, it's good. This tapping up there, no, you wouldn't expect that because it's got heavier bracing up there, but down here that is just so good. And I'm sure if you do that thing where you howl into there, it would come back to you beautifully. Okay, well, next stage is just to finish cleaning. You can see this bit, cleaning the rest of the stained area off, and then it's now dried out enough for me to do my setting the neck on a permanent basis, and then we can move on. I thought I'd just show you a bit more detail as to how this process of taking the colour off of here looks. As you can see here, I've got can't think what that is. I think it's about a 180. So that, to be honest, I wouldn't recommend that for an amateur. The tool itself is quite light. As I said, it's got a controllable speed, and as soon as I turn it on, you'll see that I'm only putting pressure literally on that edge just to lightly take it off, and you'll see how effective that is. So there you can see that's the process. To strip a guitar like this from start to finish is probably in the region of about 4 hours work to be able to get this. And what I'm achieving before I do a final finish is that I'm trying to get to the stage where I've got that. I'm not going to go put it down to a very, very well sanded finish, because otherwise the colour won't take. So yes, good progress day today. I've been out for about an hour or so, and all of the stain is now off. Everything is off. There's a couple of little bits that I'm concerned about. I think if you can see there, that might need a bit of black paint touching up. I've just sanded into the binding a little bit and just taken out the top layer of the binding. It's one of the most difficult areas when the binding is so thin to be able to preserve it as it is, and I've got 90% of the case, but that I can just simply before its lacquer coat is done, then I can just simply put a bit of black paint on there and nobody will ever know. I'm not at all happy about this repair, and I might just dig it out again, but I wanted to show you that with the use of super glue and some dust or some shavings, I filled in that little hole, but I'm not happy with it. I may find another way of doing it, because if I'm going to keep this neck basically in mahogany, that is going to, in my head, it's going to scream at me. Okay, so the neck itself, I don't know whether I did say at one stage or other, compared to my favorite guitar, which is not here, well, it is here, but I won't bother to go back on it. But compared to my favorite guitar, I found that this neck was, it had a slight V in it, and I'm used to quite a rounded neck, so I have literally just spent half an hour with some sandpaper, I think it was about 120 grit sandpaper, and just running it over. What I do is like a seesaw effect from side to side with a strip of sandpaper, and took that down. And then I've used, to compare my other one, I have this very, very ancient tool. You can tell how ancient it is. Look at that printing on the side of the logo. Very, very 60s and 70s. It's a thing which allows you to duplicate. So I can put that on the other neck and then bring it across here at the same stage or other, and see how closely it matches up. And as you can see then, and when you finish with it, you just simply bash it on its side and they all go straight up and they all go straight together again. Very, very nice tool. And if you can find one of those for guitar making, I've had it for quite a long time, but as I say, it's probably 60 years old. That I don't think it's anything that's made anymore, but I think I paid about £5 for it in a junk shop somewhere. I just happened to see one. I thought, oh, that's grand. It's always the case when you're looking for tools for doing various jobs. There's all these things that people haven't the foggiest idea what they're for, but you know they're always cheap. Right, okay, end of my tip. Anyway, so I've now got the neck to a lovely extent where I know that from a player's point of view, there was also a high point there, actually. It's interesting. I just felt a high point, and that I know would drive me insane as a player. It's funny how neurotic we are about necks, but actually now I've got that one really nice. It was a little bit bumpy, and it had a couple of little pressure marks in it where it had been resting up against things for a long time. I can still feel a little edge there, but I don't think that's on the is that on the top edge or the bottom edge? I still might do a little bit of sanding, but this is purely my preference and nothing to do with anything else. Other than that, that's all feeling very, very nice, and it's all will be lovely, that neck. Say undecided a bit whether it's going to go the dark brown the same as it was before, or whether I'm going to leave it in a much more kind of mahogany look about it. Anyway, go to the bit that really has got us all the way here, and it's this the neck angle. Now, the other day I said I'm going to have to work out how to make a jig to hold the neck in place while I glue it, which was a bit odd because a guitar actually has an inbuilt neck jig, effectively, or neck holder in placer, shall I say, and that are the strings. So this is my progress. What I've done here at the moment is, first of all, we know that if you put a straight edge along there, this is much repeated in these videos, is that you get a 5, at the moment with it opened up, you get a 5mm closure point. You get a 5mm gap between the top, which is a little on the high side, and I want it to be about 3. Again, if I'm comparing it to my other guitar, which I slacken the strings off, made no difference whether I slackened them off, it was still 3mm there. Slacken the strings off, still 3mm. So what I've done here is that I'm going to do the same thing to get it to 3mm. Because I haven't got to worry, because the neck itself is aligned perfectly, there's no problem at all, because that's how Yamaha did it, and we haven't upset that. What we have upset is the up and down angle of it, obviously. So what I've done here is that I'm starting to work with some little tiny wedges, and I think you can see it's that piece there. These are just little bits of mahogany that I've just planed down. In fact, they're little bits of mahogany I actually already find lying around, because I've got an old ukulele, a bit of an old one. I used to make lots and lots of ukuleles, and I've got lots of these boards that I've still got lying around, and they're really useful because I just chop them up for all sorts of things because I never got around to using them. And what I do, in order to make a taper on it so that it goes down really, really deeply, I get one of these little pieces which I cut, you can see there, get some double-sided sticky tape on there, and then I can just simply rub at an angle. I could have used that side, I think it's already got an angle on it, but then I just simply rub it up and down some sandpaper until you get a tapered edge on there, and then you know that whatever you're going to do and compress it, you're going to get gluing surface wherever you want it. And that's what we've got there. So I've got one of them in there, but this is only a temporary one. That one is going to come out and be replaced by one that's going to go full width. This is just me playing with the thing. Anyway, so I've got that in there as a test, and I've ramped the strings up. So that's my string tensioning patented guitar string neck angle jig, and I've ramped the strings up. Not much tension in them, but there's enough tension to make a difference, and I just tighten them up until I've got the angle here. It's really, really simple and really straightforward, and bloody obvious when you realize what's going on. So now I've using that to tension it up, and now we actually have, you can't quite see it because I'm not putting it, but actually that's now there it is. That is just about, I can't put it out because I need the hand for the phone. I've got what I'm looking for, which is a 3mm one. I can take a little bit more tension and it will just come up very, very slightly. But this then, so once I've got that sorted out, this is the process, but once I've actually got it sorted out, I've got to make my my little biscuit wedges deep enough to go down there. They can go down full depth once they're tapered. I can put some smaller ones on this. Once I've got that, then I can hammer in some smaller ones in there, take them out, glue them. I don't know whether I'm going to be worried about putting ones down the side, but I may just put some little tapers down there. They will be very tiny, but anything that I can do, having got this angle right, that I can glue in place, then I know it's clearly going to be, you know, this is when it will be really locked in tight. So the next time you see this, you will be seeing these all in place, glued under tension, and then I will leave it. I will curb my enthusiasm for coming back to the guitar, and I'll leave it for a good couple of days for all of that to settle. So quick update, got this all glued in. I don't know whether you can see if I move that. Oh, it's better. If you move it back, you can see we have the main wedge, which goes all the way down behind the joint. As you saw before, we tapered that so that it goes all the way down to the bottom of the joint, so really forcing this neck apart at that point, which is what we want to do. In other words, holding out the gap at the top of the heel. It's got a little block in there which also goes down about halfway, which helps to kind of wedge the whole thing together. I've got some very small, less than 1 millimeter wide, like I did, because if you remember before, I managed to get standing knife blades, those half standing knife blades down either side of those. So there's one in there, and they're all glued in place. I don't think that's capable of moving. I don't think it'll ever move again. So we're then on to the next thing, which of course now our fingerboard, which slots up against there, which is all right, that's okay. Fits width-wise, the slot's going to be all right once we sorted that out. It needs to come down a little bit. There's something stopping it go down, but that's fine. And I've calculated that simply, in order to carry on the without making sure, so it don't create a hump up at this end, then it's going to have a tiny drop away, because that won't matter because it's so rare that you're not playing any chords or anything substantial up there. So provided the action's nice up to here, I'm perfectly game with that. That's fine. And it basically needs lifting by the height of, or the, whatever you call it, the depth of this ruler, just that slither, which I've measured that, and it's about 1 millimeter thick. So what I need to do is to take the slice of the fretboard out and just build a taper onto it, a little bit of I'm trying to get it out now. So what I'm going to do is clean that up, clean the bottom of it up, and then I will use a piece of the ukulele material to ramp it up just 1 millimeter more at this end than at that end, and then glue it all in, clamp it up. Okay, so I've moved on a little bit. Everything in the neck had gone off hard beautifully. In the meantime, I've finished doing my work on the fingerboard itself. It's a fingerboard on the neck itself, and I've really got it so that it feels beautiful. Sanded this down to around about 400 grit, so that it would still take the dye. And this is an actual one from the it's a teak one from a guitar supplier, rather than being just an ordinary wood dye. So it's a water-based wood dye on there. Going back to up here, you can see the stage I'm at is having glued this in place. I'm going to show you at the bottom here underneath is that you can see there's a slightly different color. There's just over 1 millimeter of, it's about 1.5 millimeters worth of spacer, which is tapered back and sort of disappears somewhere really just before where that masking tape starts, just purely to give that, you can actually see the effect of it. It is actually tilting upwards. But if I was to put a straight edge on that, you would actually see that from the fret here, or no, so the fret here, the one which I've removed, there is a very slight drop away. But as I say, on an acoustic guitar, that nobody's ever really going to be bothered too much. As I say, slight drop away there. The good thing about that is that you're never going to get any fret buzz there, because it's just below. It's always going to be facing downwards, that piece, and that isn't a problem. The important thing is there's no noticeable, it doesn't suddenly get a ramp up here and there's a hump anywhere in the body join area. It's all really good till till there, and then it dips away. So I know that's going to be fine. What I've got there on, you're seeing at the moment, is you're seeing the fret in place, replace. That's just the old fret, and I've got a little guard around it, little metal guard around it, so I can then use my three-sided file. It's me that needs a clean. But anyway, it's all working fine. And what I did was I was setting the fingerboard up, the fretboard up, in order to get the gap right and to carry the fretboard along at the right same level, so I didn't have to bother to measure anything. What I did was, when I glued it in place, I found a little this odd device. I don't know, it was a file, I think, at one stage or other, but it so happened it's the right width for the tang of the fret, the bit underneath, the bit underneath that you don't see that goes into the board. So when I glued it all up, I put that in there as well, just purely to retain the slot. And then, looking back on here, I was just able to clean that slot up. This blade is also exactly the right width, as we've said before, to when I cut the original one. So it does mean there is a little bit of residual work. I'll take that off there. By the way, yeah, I put that super glue on there to remind me to say that, in fact, when I do these sort of jobs, if it's just a one-off, normally I wouldn't use super glue, but in this case, in order to get one fret back, then I will use super glue. Now, we can look here. It actually looks worse than it is, but as you can see, there will be a little bit of filling to do, where it's just that little bit of hole there, a little bit of gap across there that will need a bit of filling out, and also where you can see I went a little bit too far in with the thing. But I mean, considering so much work has taken place on this neck, this is going to have as it was in the Yamaha, where you would potentially have binding, which I could also do. I could just simply go and bind this, cut it out with a router and bind it. But all I'm going to do is to fill this gap up in here and do a coat of black all the way along here as it was before, and nobody will be any the wiser. There's still a little bit of work going around in these edges and things in here, but actually basically it's all beginning to look pretty sound. And well, it's certainly sound, but now I've just got to do the fiddly work with some light sandpaper, a little bit of filler. You can see it's stuck very, very firmly to the soundboard itself, that section of the fretboard, and it's all still lining up perfectly. So we're nearly there. Just as I say, bit of fret dressing. I showed you this one before. It's my three-sided and very, very useful. Use this one a lot. I don't have any other technical tools, but I have a very cheap little tool that allows me just to crown the frets. It's I'm just looking for it. I had it here a minute ago. In other words, it's just a file, like a file in a groove that you can just simply run across the it just simply crowns the fret. But I mean, one can do this. If you're just doing one, you can just do this with a bit of emery paper and then just basically and just run it down until you get down to about 1200 little bits of paper, and then you find it'll all match in with the other ones. You just need to make sure that the edges are not going to dig into your hands. They're beautiful ends of these frets, actually. I'm really impressed. Like everything else on this Yamaha, it's very user-friendly. So I thought, as I hadn't gone through the steps involved in the refinish, having made the decision to do a complete refinish on this guitar, then I thought, well, perhaps I can at least go through some of the techniques in kind of retrospect. As you see at the moment, it's up to the stage where it's pretty much onto its final coat of cellulose before I do a final slight rub down and polish, but I'll go into that in a bit more in detail in a second. So I was going to do the guitar a little lighter on the back and sides, but when I did it, it just didn't look right. It just didn't look as authentic. And also because I'd got one or two small repairs, where is it going? Here in the heel, that I wouldn't be able to cover up with a sort of mahogany dye, then I've decided to go sort of almost perhaps even a little darker than the original Yamaha colour, but I quite like it. It's fine, it's not a problem. So what did I use? Well, the main brown colour is just simply a dark brown. This one's from Northwest Guitars in the UK, but I mean, there are so many different ones. I do tend to use a water-based guitar specific, specific colour stain for the main parts of the guitar, particularly as this one's got had a very light maple backing on it, maple colour on the thing. So it's taken quite a few coats of that. In fact, I think I've used pretty much the whole of that one on this, getting down to that colour on there and on the neck. I'll put that to one side. I have a fairly standard, again, a UK old style ordinary wood dye. It's just this light oak color it's a very cheap and nasty, available in any country, I'm sure available all over the world. The light oak one I have found over the years is perfect for these older tops. That gives them a little bit more of an age finish. As you can see, that I haven't gone down too far on this one. It's still showing some of the original kind of, it's still retained basically its original kind of, you know, road-worn look about it, which is really nice. And I've managed to not sand it down to any points where it's gone below the surface. This is always the danger, as we've discussed in other videos. Okay, so there's the two stains. I'll put those away to one side. As far as the actual paint is concerned, now there are numerous variations on guitar things, from the very most basic ones, which I have used in the past, which have just been French polish, which never really dries out. It's just like it's I don't know the best way to describe it. It's an old traditional way of doing it, particularly on things like classical guitars and stuff like this. But you move through the years with your polyesters and your polyethylenes and whatever it is. But I tend to go back to the one that was more likely to be used in the 50s and 60s, which are the Nitro cellulose ones, which are now becoming very popular on relict electric guitars, because they come up as a sort of checkered finish, and they can be made to look, you know, 50 years old by putting them in ovens and things like this, and or freezing them and all sorts of things. So this one here has got a Nitro cellulose finish on it. This is what I've done on here. My process is using this gun, which, to be honest, is a little more powerful. We now have to use it on a very, very low setting. This one I did the first two coats in my spray gun, very much thinned down with thinners, very, very light coats. But in my opinion, is laying on the two base coats with my spray gun has a tendency to give you a much, much harder finish initially. And I can also do it quite thinly. Because if I'm doing patching up and things like, so I'll put that to one side. If I'm doing patching up and things like this, and I'll tend to use, again, cellulose, clear gloss, which matches with this stuff. It's still nitrocellulose and an aerosol. And it's basically, I still would use that for doing necks and things. It's just because I've got a bit more control over it than I got over the spray gun. The glory about using nitros is that you can kind of do a bit, let it go off, sand a bit, and if you sand through a place, then you can just simply put another coat of spray on it, again where I use the aerosol, and it doesn't, you know, it all effectively, you know, it all melds in at the end of the day, and when you sand it down, you know, you're none the wiser. So on this one, it's had 3 coats. First 2 coats, as I say, done with a spray gun. And then what I do, this is my technique. It's all, as you notice, there's no tools here apart from the spray gun. There's no polishers or whatever it is. There is a thing we call in the UK a rubber. You would call it an eraser if you're in the States, not to confuse. I know there's a grammatical problem with those words. But anyway, that's just a normal household grammatical rubber and a piece of ordinary bar sponge and fine wire wool. So my first process is using these little bits of fine wool, and I just simply I'm basically just knocking off very lightly. I'm just evening up all the hard spots on the guitar until you get, there's no water involved, no spray or whatever it is. I'm doing it once it's perfectly dry, and I'm just carefully, and it's amazing that it will just take off the top layers. It will leave you with a kind of fairly smooth but not shiny finish, that one will. And those are, as I say, usual hardware store type of stuff. You can tell these at least get older and wear out so quickly. I have tons of this stuff lying around. Then what I will tend to do is, once I've got that top coat, and I'll do that for the first 2 coats, then the third coat, and this is a stage I'm up to with this one, I will then use wet and dry. After I've done another coat with that one, with the wire wool, I will then do on the top coat, I will use 1000 and 1200 grit wet and dry paper, my wet and dry bucket, and using the rubber eraser, whichever one you call it, or the sponge, and I simply use pieces of it, tear a piece off, wrapped around, and just work at it very, very carefully, using the rubber is there to absorb things, and I just simply just work lightly on there and then dip it in the water, rub again, and surprisingly it doesn't take very long. I mean, it probably take me, because my spraying technique is pretty good, I'm probably 5-10 minutes will probably, with wet and dry 1000 grit, will probably get that down to a finish where I'm perfectly able to then, you know, where it's sort of semi-shiny with the wet and dry. Now, my secret weapon in all my guitar building over 40 years, and God help us if they ever discontinued this stuff, because I love it, and I've just bought a brand new one of these. It's a very old, you can see it's a very old British product. This is GB's #1. Whether it's available in other countries, I don't know. This is Brasso, and it's brass polish. And that is my final polishing coat. And again, I do it with by hand with rags, and it's utterly amazing on cellulose. There are alternatives. If you look around, I mean, car restore workshops will have cream, which is chrome polish. There's used to be a brand called Auto Sol something or other, and I've had a couple of other brands, but I still personally prefer my Brasso, which that one there will probably last me several years. I've only just replaced it, as I say, since about lockdown, so you can see how long it lasts. You don't need very much of it, on a rag, and then just simply polish it up. As you can see, all hand done. And I reckon, I have a machine polisher, I have an air polisher, and I have a battery operated polisher, but I still reckon I can do a hand polish more quickly, more thoroughly, with a better finish than I can do in a machine polish. And also I think I like it because I like the fact that you kind of get slight rounded, sometimes you get sort of slightly, you know, it'll polish in the roundy bits, which kind of tend to be, it just softens the whole thing up. So there we have it, 3 layers of cellulose, wet and dry paper, 1000 grit, and a bit of fine wire wool. I don't think there's anything else. I think that's a lot. And we'll have a look at that when we, you know, we'll have a look. You'll obviously see the finish when it's all put together, and see how lovely and shiny it will be. If you're going for a matte finish, then you can use, obviously, these are inbuilt gloss ones, and that's what I always want to do. I just happen to prefer it. But obviously you can do the same thing with matte, and you don't need to do, you'll virtually finish on the 1000 grit stage if you're doing a matte one. Key to these things, again, with using cellulose, is you don't want great big thick layers of stuff on it. The coats I've been putting on here are very light. I've got a theory that the more coats you have, and I don't know what these guitars, which have got that very heavy polyester coat, I think they must be sort of like, that's like having 2 bodies, one wrapped in and the other. This is all very, very fine. And as I say, the other reason for doing this by hand is the fact that you can sort of, if you do rub in a bit on a corner or an edge or something like that, then you can just put a tip of colour back in there and just top it up with the aerosol can. It'll all just blend in. It's not a problem. I've done something slightly unorthodox with the headstock, and that is the headstock itself was quite deeply pitted with this mahogany. And as you know, I mean, I finally managed to find a water slide transfer to do the Yamaha on the top here. So what I decided to do is I wanted a better finish, and it wasn't particularly, I couldn't get it looking particularly attractive. So I had an odd bit of rosewood, very, very thin. It's about, you can see it there, it's only about 1.5 mil thick. I just happened to have a piece of rosewood lying around. I could use even thinner piece if I wanted to do a bit of thin laminate and a bit of thin veneer, I mean to say. And I don't know whether you can see it on here, but I've really treating it exactly the same way as the rest of the guitar, same finish, and therefore, but I've concentrated on getting it nice and flat so that it'll take the water slide decal when it arrives. But again, treated the same way, and that's just simply glued on there and the holes drilled in very carefully from the back so I don't open them out too much. And I just cut a little hole around there. That looks rather sort of ham-fisted, but in fact that's actually matching the the inside of the original hole around the truss rod completely. So we're now a few days after that. I had the chance for the cellulose to sit in a bit and get a nice hand polish. There you are, you can see that reflected quite nicely. Still a little bit more polishing to do, but that's it. The top, the refinishing has accentuated the one flaw which I've had to leave, which is here, which is basically where there was a peel back in the top layer of the laminate. I didn't want to go any further because obviously it would expose what's underneath. I mean, my alternative could have been put a little flake of spruce or something in there and rub it in, but I have a feeling it might have shown more with the glue marks. So there is you can see it's a bit of a different color, and there's a slight, almost looks like a crack, but it's not. And that unfortunately has got a bit accentuated. But anyway, we are talking about not destroying the entire character of the 50-year-old guitar. I've got just about the right amount of brown stain on it to be able to still show through the grain that was originally, what grain there was underneath is shown up quite nicely. And I do quite like the coloration in the top. I'm very pleased with that, and it's polished up nicely. You can, if you could see on here, I can see it, there's rumps and bumps all over the place, but that's just purely the stresses and strains of 50 years of it, you know, as we've discussed so many times. As far as the action's concerned, yes, the neck reset absolutely has paid off. Whereas it was very, very, as I say, it was so tight before that it wasn't bouncy. All I've done with this is simply put on the old strings. I've got a new neck, which a new saddle, which I haven't cut back at all. It's a new bone saddle, I haven't cut back. So basically I've just put it in there, whatever it came up with, I've checked it out and seen what it is. And it's given me 2.75 on the bottom E, and which you can hear there's a little bit of rattle there, and 1.75 on the E, which is almost the same as my other favorite guitar. So I've really got it to the stage where it's really light, and I mean there's masses of room here for adjustment. I've got a few at that level, I've got a few choke points on the strings. So my feeling is that I shall do another video on a sand down. I'll take the frets out, give this give the fingerboard underneath, the rosewood fingerboard, a proper leveling out, concentrate a bit more about that and refret it and see how it goes. I've got it in dark gap at the moment. God, it's beautiful. You can hear that's got a heck of a lot of bounce to it. Yeah, so really lovely. So the only major expense, if you like, if anyone was doing this themselves, would have been the open back tuners, which are still relatively cheap compared to what some people pay. They're under £30, so they'd be about what, $35–40. as I said, I refaced this, just really my own sort of peace of mind, but I mean, it was totally unnecessary, as is everything else I've done, I should imagine. But I have ended up with a guitar that's got an absolutely adorably light action as it is. And it's just very, very light to the touch, springy, responsive, and as I said, lovely tone. So, how much did it all cost? What have I done to it? How much would it cost you if you got me to do this job? How much would it cost you if you just bought the bits and pieces? What tools would you need? So I'm going to move into the workshop now, and we will just have a summary of what's gone into it and break down those costs a bit. Now, I'm really lucky to have a fully equipped workshop, although it's very, very tiny, not much bigger than a garden shed, as you've probably seen. But I have things like bandsaws, I have planer thicknessers, all sorts of numerous sanding things, stack of planes, things like this. But let's just simply concentrate on the things that actually have gone into this job, which is basically the neck reset and the refinishing. So on the neck resets, first of all, very, very important, things you would need as an amateur, bare minimum thing you need is a long straight edge. This one's a 60 centimetre one. I don't know what that is in imperial, I'm sorry to say, but 600 is fine. I've got a smaller one there, always useful because sometimes you're just cross-checking measurements, one against the other. The other thing which I think is an absolute essential, and these only cost about £4 or £5 from wonderful Amazon, the little string action measurers which have along the side, this is how you measure your action. And for those of you that aren't in the UK, this one has got metric, but it also on the back, on the sides, also has it for US. It's got it everything in thou. Absolutely essential. Useful to have a reasonable set of sharp chisels. You don't need too many, a couple will do, and that presumably means you need some form of sharpening device. I'm just trying to think, I don't think I did use any chisels on this job, but they're always obviously useful to have around. Saw, I've got dozens of saws, but I now these days tend to pretty much use these Japanese saws, which are not expensive. They're bull saws, which means that obviously you're pulling backwards to be able to do your cut. The great thing about these, and I think we covered this in the earlier video, is that when I was cutting the slot to take the back end of the fretboard off, then this is absolute. This almost identically matches the slot for the fret, and in fact I have used this same saw for exactly that purpose, for cutting fret slots as well, because it just seems to work better than all my little fret saws and fancy saws like that. Just tend to use that one all the time. So Japanese saw, double-sided, perfect. I have a pair of things. This is for extracting, this is for cutting ends of frets, and also for pulling frets out. And all I've done on this one is it's ground flat, so that in other words I can get right in behind the tang of a fret and pull it out. Really, really useful. Another fairly essential item. Okay, in terms of the refinishing type of things, extremely cheap. Again, Amazon, I don't know, a couple of quid, something like this. Just steel scrapers for when you're cleaning the finish off and things like this. Amateur luthiers just don't use these. All the pros have loads of them. So that always tells me something. I've got lots of them. I've got square ones, flat ones, round ones. The round one is the one I used on this when I was taking the finish off. Just really, really good for getting into those odd corners and scooping around and getting the finish off without destroying the surface of the guitar. Also, the one power tool I've got here, which I would say if you're doing refinishes, if you're doing more than one, I mean these are very cheap because they're actually, what's it called, Temu, AliExpress, cordless. angle grinder, but much slower and less vicious than a mains operated one. And I've, as we've said before, for taking off the finish of a guitar or sanding the finish down, I have these really spongy discs on here. Absolutely essential. But you can do it by hand, but my goodness me, that would save you a lot of trouble, and also incredibly useful for other jobs in the house. I think they're not more than about £30. 30 was, which is what, $35, something like that, even with a couple of batteries on it. They're lightweight and they do the job really well. What else have I got down here? For taking that, for heating up the fretboard, to either take the fret out. I forgot to say that can be done more easily with a soldering iron, which I haven't got down here, so a soldering iron would be useful. But any kind of heat source that will take it up to about somewhere between about 150 and 200 degrees localized heat, to be able to go on the fretboard, the end of the fretboard, to be able to loosen the glue. This is a heat blanket with a heat, with a, I think they used to call it a rheostat in their control, which will take me up to 200 centigrade on this one. But you can use a domestic iron, just don't get caught, you know, the usual story. We've all been there. So therefore I tend not to use things from the house. There's one thing which does share its job in the house, which is a specialised area, specialised item, which is the steamer. Now, this is a purely domestic one. I think we've gone through this before as well. I think it cost me about £5 from eBay Marketplace. It's one, not eBay Marketplace, Amazon, whatever you call it, Facebook Marketplace. It's one of those things that people buy and then think, what the heck did I buy that for? But in fact, they're really useful. They will create a vast amount of steam. And as you saw before, it's perfect for getting in there and in behind the joints. This is the end of it up there. And it creates a head of steam. Really useful. You can do all sorts of things like having pipes off the top of, what do they call themselves? Not pressure cookers and things like this. But actually, to be honest, for a £5, that was a good buy, and I've used it time and time again, and it's still looking in remarkably good condition. So, as you say, there's not really much in the way of expensive power tools, and I'm trying to make sure that there's nothing here that I didn't, you know, there's nothing around that I didn't use in it. I mean, obviously things like screwdrivers, I'll assume that people have got hammers and things like that. The other thing, which I've got several of these because I go through them quite quickly. These are just cut back old pieces of spirit level, and they're cut to a certain length, which I don't know what that is. That one's cut to a particular length because what I do is I use this as a sanding block, and that one's cut to about 450 millimeters, 45 centimeters, which is, I then use a bit of double-sided sticky tape along this edge here, and then I put whatever grade of sandpaper I want, probably round about 400 or 500 to start off with, moving down to about maybe polishing down to about maybe 800 to 1,000 grit sandpaper stuck along strips along there, and I use that up and down to level my frets out. While we're talking about frets, I get away, to be honest, without using too much specialist stuff, although I have got all the things like three-way files for frets, and somewhere along the line I have a fret crowning tool, which is not here. The other thing which can be quite useful is just, which often comes with frets and things like that, is just purely one of these little, some of these little metal strips which go across the fret to protect the fretboard. Yeah, get through loads of those too. Very, very cheap. But to be honest, other than that, you know, that's probably all you need, and that's not sophisticated if you were to do this job yourself. So what did I actually use up on the guitar? Well, always use an absolute ton of masking tape. So absolutely down to very, very small rolls now. I also keep a lot of wet and dry paper for hand sanding. All grits from about 180 down to 1000 grit, or even 1200 in some cases, which is the polishing grade. But yeah, covering everything from sanding wood right the way down through to polishing wood or polishing the cellulose out. Always got lots of it. I've also, on this one, because I use the sanding discs with the portable, the cordless angle grinder, I've got lots and lots of grades of this stuff, which are the little Velcro pads, starting off at 120, and I think on my case working down to about 400. I've got quite a light touch with that angle grinder because I've been doing it for a long time, so I can get away with actually not leaning into it when it's you know, we're not putting too much pressure on it, so I can get away with using something like a 120 grade. But I think if you're doing it for the first time, I think I'd start around about 320 to 400 and work backwards from there, rather than, because otherwise you do risk taking edges off if you're inexperienced with it. Okay, so I used about, I suppose about 10 or a dozen of those little pads. Okay. On this job, it's one of the first guitars I think I've ever done which I haven't used grain filler on. This is just simply something just to do pretty much at the last stages before you put the cellulose on. This is clear, just purely to fill in the pores on the in the grain before you put the cellulose on. But sometimes I quite like that finish of it, the sort of pockmarked finish on it. But in this case, most of the Yamaha guitar is fairly close grained stuff, so it didn't actually need it. The cellulose fills the grain, the colour and the cellulose fill the grain quite nicely. Talking of colour, basically a £7.99, £8, what's that, $9–10 wood dye, light oak one, which I tend to use on a lot of my vintagey looking guitars. It just seems to work for me. As I say, not expensive, only need one coat of it on there, and Bob's your uncle, you've got a nice vintagey look on it. Seems to work beautifully on that one. When it comes to the finish on the actual back and sides, then I tend to go for a guitar. This one's from Northwest Guitars in the UK. It's a specific guitar colour, it's a dark brown one. And as you saw on the O1, this one, I think it needs about 3 or 4 applications on the back and sides, and I did this on the neck as well. But it still was having a certain amount of grain showing through, which was work to treat. Good stuff. Always use a guitar one, guitar specific one, particularly if you're going to do if you're trying to get a rosewood colour or a mahogany colour, then guitar ones are pretty essential. If you're going to do pink, you can get a pink one as well. Okay, there's that. The main finish, the cellulose clear gloss. This is automotive cellulose clear gloss, still available in classic car industry in the UK. These cost about, I buy these in bulk. Sometimes I use my spray gun, but on this one I used aerosols. I think this was about £14–15 for 2. And I've used 1.5 of them, so you can budget for £15, what's that, $17–18 of Nitro cellulose for a total guitar finish. So that's that one. Also, the product which I think might only be available in the UK, but if it is available anywhere else, go and buy it if you're going to do these jobs. I mean, this big can here is going to last me probably a couple of years. It's brass polish. Very traditional product, been around in the UK obviously for hundreds of years, I would think, probably as long as there have been brass. Lasting shine, excellent results on brass, copper, stainless steel and It is magic. Go into any English luthier, you'll always find a bottle of that on the shelf. Don't know what's available in other countries, but you can, from automotive shops, get chrome polish. It's like a paste. It will do the same job, but it's a little more aggressive. I find this is gentler. I can get more of deep shine with it, and always put it on by hand, rub it in well. I have used it with my polisher, but in fact, generally speaking, on a guitar, I like to get in through the corners, and I find I can get just as job done just as quickly by doing it by hand as if I was doing it by using my machine. But yeah, horses for courses. So there we have it. Perfectly playable 1971 guitar, brought up to modern guitar standards with a nice low action and a nitro finish. What does it cost? Well, if you were to do this job yourself and you felt like actually attempting doing a neck reset and doing the finish yourself, then the breakdown is something like this. As far as the neck reset is concerned, there weren't any consumables. The only thing I did buy was a £8 saddle, bridge saddle, and for this thing, my choice, because I didn't like the old tuners, I have bought a £34 set of open back butterbean type tuners, which I love. I've got them on several guitars. They're cheap, but I like them. You know, don't feel the need to have expensive Grovers or anything like that. The only thing else that I bought on this one is I have replaced the transfer on there, which was about £5, £5 or £6, I think. So very, very cheap. Roughly speaking, all I spent on that, if I was just doing the neck reset, would have been those two things, which totaled to about £45, i.e. about $50. As far as the actual finish is concerned, the stains, paint, sandpaper, masking tape, polish, things like that, a total of around about £45 to £50 for those sort of things. In other words, about $50 to $55. So if you live in the UK and you don't fancy this, but you want to take a vintage guitar, whatever value, this one, as we know, is about £230 originally. Would you spend the amount of money on that and get somebody like myself to do it? You might. Alternatively, I've worked on guitars that are way up in the thousands doing the same sort of thing. If I do a neck reset, it like the one we showed you, whether the neck comes right out or whether it's a partial one, roughly speaking about £300 to £350 being done in the UK. Obviously I can only do UK ones. I'm not prepared to send, collect or deliver or whatever guitars outside the United Kingdom. So that's the sort of price, just add on whatever the delivery and collection cost is. So that's about £300 to £350 my labour costs for doing that. If it's the finish you're wanting, then it's a similar sort of price, round about the £300 mark, to get this nitro finish, to get it sanded right back to bare finish and coated. And you can have a gloss finish, you can have a matte finish, you can have a pink finish, you can have a marbled finish, you can have anything you damn well like. I hope you've enjoyed all this. I'm going to do some future videos on this particular instrument because I'm going to, at some stage, well, not now, I've got time for it to settle down. I'm going to do a complete refret, and that also includes the leveling of the fingerboard itself, taking that down and getting it all really, really good. It's really just sort of gilding the lily a bit on that one. It's perfectly playable as it is. The other thing I'm going to be using, because I'm doing this one for live gigs, I'm also going to be putting in a Journey Tech pickup system in underneath the bridge with the thing, and I'll do it with the strap button jack, and I'll do a video on installing those. They're cheap, around about £50, the little Journey Techs, and I think they're absolutely magic. Far better than things about 5 or 6 times the cost. So you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and all those usual things. Comments. Have you tried a neck reset? Have you destroyed a guitar completely? Have you bought a 40 quid guitar and tried to take the neck off it for practice and then done it on your £3,000 Martin? I'd be interested to know if you've done that as well. High risk occupation. Stay in touch. Bye.